Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to do this really easy split shell stitch hat. Now this hat goes perfectly with the split shell stitch scarf that I've done a tutorial on, and I will put a link to that tutorial in the description box below, so be sure to check that out. So this hat was made with the Red Heart Unforgettable, and it's a size 4 weight, although there are some strands of yarn that seem thinner to me than what a 4 usually is. This is a 100-gram ball of yarn, and to make this hat I only used half of it, so this was a full ball, and I still have a lot left, so I'm going to see if I can get a second hat out of it. The scarf took 2 balls of that, so you know, you can get a scarf. If you have 3 balls, you can get a scarf and at least 1 hat, maybe 2, we'll see. And then I'm going to use my 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. The way we're going to build this hat is we're going to work this brim first. So we're going to chain however wide we want our brim to be, and then we're going to work single crochet in the back loop only to create this ridge. And then once we get it, we're going to measure it on our heads, or if you have the size of the head for the person you're making this for, you want to single crochet back loop only for the brim as wide as your measurements are, and then we will seam it together and then start our foundation work and work the hat up this way. I worked about 6 rows of the split shell stitch without decreasing, and then you can tell up here I started the decrease. So it's really easy. I worked this up in an evening, so if once you get the pattern down, it's really easy, just like the scarf. Together they make a great gift. You also need scissors and a yarn needle, and once you have that all together, we'll get started. Okay, so to start our hat, we are going to start working the brim first. You want to do an even number. This one I did a chain of 8, and then I worked 7 single crochets. So I'm going to do that again because I like the size. This is about an inch wide brim, or tall, I guess. So I'm going to put a slip knot on my hook. And we are going to work a foundation chain of 8. Alright, so I have my 8 chains. And now we're going to work a single crochet back along. So I'm going to put a single crochet into every stitch back. Alright, there's the start of our brim. Now we're going to chain 1. And what we want to do, and it might be kind of hard to see with this yarn, we want to work in the back loop only. So you can see the top has those little V's, and you want to work in those back loops. So the first one is kind of hard to see because it's tangled up with your chain 1 and the turning chain and things like that. So just make sure you get into the back loops. And see, I'm only going through the 1 loop. There's my front loop. I picked up the back loop. And you're going to do this all the way until you get the measurement of the circumference of the head size that you need. Alright, and you can see it kind of puts a little bump up here. Now we're going to chain one and do the same thing on this side, and that will create our little ridges. Okay, so we're going to keep doing this and go into those back loops only. And that first one is hard to see, don't miss him. Back loop. And if you're ever worried that you forgot a stitch, just remember how many chains that you casted on in the beginning. So I did 8, which means I'm going to always have 7 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we've got our 7th one here. Chain 1, turn, go back. You don't work into the chain 1, that's just a turning chain. Go into the very next one, back loop only, single crochet. And that's the pattern for the brim of the hat. So just keep working your single crochet, back loops only, chaining 1 to start. Alright, so once you have a length that you need for the circumference of your head, or the head that of the person that you're making it for, you're going to want to slip stitch these 2 ends together to create that brim. Before you do that, you need to make sure that you have a multiple of 4 along the edge, because you need multiple of 4 single crochets all along here to create the split shell pattern. So what I like to do is count these little spaces on either side of that ridge on your brim as a space where I'm going to put my multiple of 4 single crochets. So what we're going to do is we're going to slip these together, and then we're going to single crochet all along the top and around until we get back to the end. And that multiple of single crochets around has to be a multiple of 4. So go ahead and count these spaces in between or wherever you can find a spot, and just make sure you have a multiple of 4. And then we'll go ahead and close up this brim so we have a start of our hat. And if you're 1 too many or 1 too short, you can always just add a row, or you can take a row out. You can add 2 rows, you can take 2 rows out, just depending on the length, the measurement that you need. So if you're close and it's already a little big, then I would take out some of these rows. If it's a little on the snug side, you could probably add a few rows. So go ahead and count up where you're going to put a multiple of 4 single crochets along your brim, and then once you have that ready, we'll continue with the pattern. Alright, so I have counted mine up. I was actually 1 over, so I took out the last row that I had done. just to make it an even multiple of 4. Now you're going to lay your brim flat, and then you're going to bring up the 2 sides together. Okay, grab your yarn. And you're just going to slip stitch across. So I've already chained 1 here. Be sure to chain 1 to kind of give you some space. And if you're not sure where the first one is, depending on how many chains you started with. So I started with 8, which means I have 7 for each row. I want to make sure I have 7 slip stitches into this to join them. So I'm just going to kind of see where they match up. All right. And I'm going to go through both of the loops. Now this is my foundation chain row, so I'm just going to put a stitch in, a slip stitch in on the first or the 7th one if I'm counting this way. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's actually going to be this one on the end. And just pull up a loop. Oops. Slip stitch. And just do that all along into each stitch across. Alright, so once you have that, you should have a straight brim. Make sure that when you're joining that they're not twisted, so you don't want to join it where it creates that twist. You want it to be nice and flat. Now here is where we put in our single crochets all along the top. So you should have counted, and you should have a space for each single crochet that's going to be a multiple of 4. If you have miscounted, you can stick an extra single crochet in somewhere along here. It's not really a big deal. You just need a multiple of 4 to create that split shell stitch pattern. So I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to work a single crochet, multiple of 4, all along the top of this brim. And just pop your hook in to those spaces. And when you're done, you're going to join to that first single crochet that you did. And this chain single crochet around the top will just give us a nice foundation to start working the pattern. Alright, so I went ahead before I slip stitched into that first single crochet that I had done. I went ahead and I double, triple checked that my single crochets were a multiple of 4. So go ahead and double, triple check to make sure that that multiple is 4. Slip stitch to the first single crochet that you did, chain 1. Now we're going to start with the split shell stitch pattern. So you've chained 1, we're going to chain an additional 2, and we're going to double crochet into that same stitch. And that is going to be the start of one of our split shells. So it will be the start of one of these, and when we get back to the other end, we will put those last 2 double crochets in our chain and we'll slip stitch. Okay, so this is where we're starting with one of these half split shells. Alright, so now we continue with the pattern. We're going to skip 3. So 1, 2, 3. Into the next, we are going to put 2 double crochets. We're going to chain 1 and put 2 more double crochets into that same spot. And that is our first split shell. Okay, skip 3. Into the next one, we're going to do the same thing. 2 double crochets. Chain 1, 2 double crochets. Skip the next 3. Into the next, we're going to do our split shell. So 2 double crochets. Chain 1, 2 double crochets. Skip 3, into the next, 2 double crochets, chain 1, 2 double crochets. So continue with this pattern and I'll meet you back at the beginning. Alright, so now I'm going to skip the next 3, and there is my chain. It's like a false stitch, so don't get confused with that one. Skip 3 and work your other half of the split shell into this space right here. So I did 2 double crochets, and now I'm going to chain 1, and I am going to slip stitch into the top of that first chain 3 that we did. Alright. For the next row, we're going to chain 1 to get some height, and we're going to work our split shell pattern into the chain 1 spaces all the way around. So 2 double crochets into that chain 1 space. Skip this, go into that next chain 1 space in between your little split shells and put another split shell in. And you're going to do this all the way around. So keep going with the pattern and I will see you back at the beginning. Alright, so I'm back where we started, and if it's helpful for you, stick a stitch marker in where we single crocheted, or I mean where we slip stitched into the top for that first round. So what you'd want to do, you can see the two gray double crochets is where we finished that first row of our pattern, and then we did a slip stitch to the top of that red double crochet. We chained one, and then we worked our next shell. So if it's hard for you to determine where your rounds start, stick a stitch marker in there, and that will help keep it straight for you. So I'm back here. This is the last place I need to put in a shell. And then I'm going to slip stitch right into one of these stitches here to join the round. Now here's where I would put in a stitch marker in here, so I knew that this was the start of my next round. So what you're going to do is just work that pattern for about 6 rows. So each shell is a row, so that's our first row, that's our second row. I did this one without decreasing for 6 rows. Alright, I have one more shell to work, and then I'm back at the beginning. So I'm going to work that shell, 2 double crochet, chain 1, 2 double crochet, alright, now I'm going to slip stitch into this stitch right here to join that round. I'm going to chain 1, and I've done 6 rows in total of this pattern, and I'm going to start to decrease now. So to decrease, we're going to work a shell. So after we slip stitch, we chain 1, work a shell into the next chain 1 space, like we have been doing. Alright, now we skip to the next shell, chain 1 space. In this, instead of working a shell, we're going to single crochet. And then we skip to the next, work a shell. In the next, single crochet. So you're going to work a shell, a single crochet, a shell, a single crochet, all the way around into those chain 1 spaces. And I'll meet you back at the beginning. Alright, I'm back at the beginning. I have one more shell to work into. I've just worked a shell into this last one. So I'm going to pop a single crochet into this one. I'm going to join to complete the round, chain 1. The next row we're not going to work a decrease, so you're just going to put a shell into each shell like we've been doing. When you get to this point, we're going to slip stitch into our chain 1s from the previous, or we're going to slip stitch into the single crochet that we did in the previous round. So we're going to put a shell into this shell. And instead of skipping to the next shell, because if we do that we'll have a big gap, I like to slip stitch into that single crochet in between the shells at this point where we decreased. So I'm just going to slip stitch, and that kind of creates a little, it doesn't give you the space, it closes up that space. Alright, so next shell, we put a shell. Alright, we come to our chain, or our single crochet from the previous round. We're going to slip stitch, next shell, put a split shell. And you're just going to work this all the way around. Every split shell will get another split shell on top of it. When you come to your single crochets from the previous round, just put a slip stitch. You're going to work that all the way around, and I'll meet you back at the beginning. Alright, so I'm back at the beginning. I'm going to put a slip stitch into that spot, and now we're going to decrease again. So I'm going to chain 1, I'm going to work a shell into the next, Alright, the next shell we're going to work a single crochet. Alright, go to the next shell, we're going to work a shell. Next shell, single crochet. Alright, next shell we're going to put a shell into. And you should start noticing that your hat is closing up at the top. It's kind of getting its shape. Alright. And it becomes a little more difficult to work with because you're cinching that up. Alright, so we just worked a shell. So into our next shell we're going to put a single crochet. Into the next shell, work a shell. Into the next shell, single crochet, And we should be back to the beginning. So I'm going to pop a slip stitch in to join. I'm going to chain 1. And you can kind of see the hat is taking shape. Alright, for the next round we are going to start with a chain 1, grab your yarn, chain 1, and we're going to work another decrease row. So we're going to start with the shell into the chain 1 space from the previous round. In the next shell, we're going to chain 1, and there's a lot of turning, so it may be hard to see on camera, but just follow the pattern. In the next shell, I'm going to put a shell, into the next shell, a chain 1 or a single crochet, and we are back at the beginning already. So I'm going to slip stitch to join that round. I'm going to chain 1, and here is where we kind of cinch them all together. So I've got, let's see the best way to show this. You've got a shell here, and you've got one over here, and you've kind of got one over here. You want to try to cinch them all together. So I'm going to go through one, and I'm going to turn, and I'm going to go from the outside through another and pull up a loop, and you can tell if you've gotten enough. There won't be any major spaces, so I think I closed them up as good as I'm going to. So once you close it up and you're happy with the space, if you're not happy, just pull that out and work through some more of the shells until you're happy. Alright, so I've pulled up that loop. I'm going to draw another loop through. We can cut our yarn, weave in our ends, and you'll have a split shell hat to match the split shell scarf. After you weave in your ends, let's pretend these are woven in, you're going to want to flip it so you have the right side, and you've got a split shell, sort of like a little beanie cap. You've got the nice rib edging down here in the fancy split shell stitch, closed up nicely at the top. I got 2 hats out of this ball of yarn. It took 2 balls to make the split shell scarf. So if you have 3 balls of that, you can make a scarf and 2 hats. The split shell beanie hat. It's a perfect match for our split shell scarf, and like I said, I'm going to put a link in the description box below for the split shell scarf, so if you are interested in making a matching set, be sure to check that out. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to my channel, and check out some of my other videos. Thanks for watching. Bye!